The moment Adrian Carter signed the voluntary resignation letter, Vanessa Brooks smiled and turned to the entire floor, announcing she was throwing a party that night to celebrate, finally clearing the last obstacle standing between her and the director's chair. Applause and laughter filled the office, while Adrian carried his box to the elevator without a word. Minutes later, the elevator opened again. Evelyn Harper, the company chairwoman, walked out pale, a document still gripped in one hand. She scanned the room once, and her voice cut through the laughter. "Where is he?" 3 hours before that elevator opened, the 9th floor of Sterling Hayes Group looked like any other Tuesday morning. Phones rang, printers hummed, and the corner conference room stood empty with its blinds half drawn. Adrian Carter's desk sat at the far end of the row by the window, the only workstation on the floor, without a single photograph plaque or novelty mug on it. Just a monitor, a keyboard, and 3 legal pads stacked square at the corner. People walked past it every day for 4 years and never once looked twice. He had come to the firm as a senior specialist in strategic accounts and stayed 1, which was the first thing anyone found strange about him. Twice the company had opened a management track, and twice Adrian had let the deadline pass without submitting his name. Human resources assumed he lacked ambition. The truth was simpler, and nobody had ever bothered to ask. Management meant travel, and travel was the one thing his life at home could not absorb. He ran a household alone, and the arithmetic of his week was fixed in a way other people's were not. So he took the work nobody else wanted, and did it from a desk. That work happened to be the hardest work in the building. When a distribution account in Cleveland went silent for 5 weeks, Adrian rebuilt the relationship over 11 phone calls and a rewritten payment schedule. When the compliance filing for the Western region came back, rejected 40 hours before the deadline, he found the error at 2 in the morning and had a corrected package couriered by 7. The floor knew these things happened. The floor did not particularly connect them to him because Adrian never stood up afterward and said so. Gregory Doyle, who sat 2 rows over and had joined the firm 8 months after Adrian once described him to a group at lunch as the guy who fixes stuff. It was not meant cruelly. It was meant as a description of furniture. That was the shape Adrian's reputation had taken over 4 years, and he had done nothing at all to change it, which the office read as agreement. Vanessa Brooks read it differently. She had run the strategic accounts department for 2.5 years, and she had a habit of pulling the client correspondence logs on Friday afternoons, the way other people read stock tickers. She wore her ambition the way she wore her jackets, tailored and impossible to miss. The director of the commercial division was retiring in the fall. She had already met with 2 board members informally, already had her presentation deck at 11 slides, and already knew exactly what was standing in front of it. It was not a competitor. Adrian had never once applied for anything. It was worse than that. It was the correspondence log itself. Every quarter, when Vanessa pulled the department's records to build her performance summary, the same name appeared underneath the biggest wins. Not in the headlines, not in the presentations she delivered upstairs, but in the substrate. The Cleveland recovery, the compliance fix, the renegotiated terms in Phoenix. If anyone on the executive floor ever opened the raw files instead of reading her summary, they would find a department whose results ran through one desk by the window, and they would find that the woman claiming to lead it had spent 2.5 years describing his work as departmental performance. She had told herself for a long time that this was normal. Managers presented team results. That was the job. But somewhere in the last year, the story had gotten harder to hold because the results were not distributed across a team. They were concentrated, and the concentration was becoming visible to anyone who looked. Then came Nolan Whitfield Industries. It had started small, and it had started with Adrian, which Vanessa knew because she had approved the initial travel expense herself and thought nothing of it at the time. A cold introduction at a trade conference in March, a follow-up call, then another. Marshall Reed, who handled North American partnerships for Whitfield, was known across the industry as impossible to move a man who had walked away from 3 suppliers in 2 years over what he called handshake problems. He did not respond to pitches. He responded apparently to a man who answered his emails at strange hours and never once oversold anything. By July, the conversation had become a negotiation. By September, it was an agreement on the table worth $12 million over 3 years, the largest single contract in the company's history, and Vanessa had done what she had always done. She had built the summary. She had presented the progress upstairs in the monthly review. She had used the word "we" so many times it stopped meaning anything, and nobody upstairs had ever asked to see the thread of correspondence underneath it, because why would they? What she told herself was that the deal was essentially finished. The terms were settled. The relationship was built. Whatever remained was paperwork, and paperwork did not require the man by the window. It required a director's signature, and in 6 weeks there would be a new director, and everything after that would belong to whoever was holding the pen. There was one thing she had not read. Marshall Reed had insisted on a personnel continuity clause in the final annex, drafted in the last round of revisions negotiated directly between him and Adrian across 4 separate calls. Vanessa had received the annex as an attachment on a Thursday and had not opened it because it ran to 40 pages of appendices, and she had a board dinner that night. She filed it. She had every intention of reading it later. On the night of October 14th, Adrian sat at his kitchen table with a laptop and a mug of coffee gone cold because Whitfield's executive committee sat in a time zone 11 hours ahead, and the final language on liability transfer had to be settled before their board convened. The call started at 10:30 at night. It was still going at 4 in the morning. Marshall Reed was on the line for all of it, and twice he apologized for the hour. Adrian told him not to. They worked through the indemnity schedule clause by clause, and at one point Reed pushed back hard on a limitation that Sterling Hayes' legal team had inserted, and Adrian did something a salesman would not do. He agreed with him. He said the clause protected Sterling and not the partnership, and he proposed alternative language that gave Whitfield more room. There was a long quiet on the other end before Reed spoke again. He said that in 19 years he had never had a supplier argue against his own legal department at 4 in the morning, and that this was the reason he was signing it all. Adrian said something non-committal and moved to the next item. He did not write the moment down. It did not occur to him that it mattered. The call ended at 10 minutes to 5. He slept for 2 hours and woke to a phone that had not charged because he had unplugged it for the laptop. He badged into the 9th floor at 9:40 on the morning of October 15th, 40 minutes past the start of core hours, and it was the first time all year he had been late for anything. Vanessa had been at her desk since 8. She watched him come off the elevator, and what moved through her was not calculation, but relief. The specific relief of a person who has already decided something and has just been handed a better reason for it. At 8:41 that morning, she had opened a departmental template and generated a document she intended to use before the end of the week. The 40 minutes made it cleaner. That was all it did. She called the meeting for 10 o'clock in the corner conference room and asked Gregory Doyle to sit in as a departmental witness. She did not tell Doyle why. Adrian came in holding the Whitfield file. He set it on the table and did not open it. Vanessa began by asking what time he had arrived, and he told her, and she wrote it down. She asked whether he was aware of the department's core hours policy. He said he was. She asked whether he had filed any notice of a schedule variance, and he said he had not, because he had been on a call with Whitfield's executive committee until nearly 5 that morning. Vanessa did not ask about the call. That was the choice, and she made it deliberately, and it took less than a second. She looked at her notes instead and said the department could not evaluate personal explanations for policy failures because if it did, everyone would have one. She said this reflected a pattern of unreliability. She used the phrase repeated availability issues, which described nothing that had ever happened. and Doyle, at the end of the table, wrote it down as though it were a fact. Adrian put his hand flat on the folder. He said there was a $12 million agreement inside it that had reached final language 6 hours earlier, and that if she wanted to discuss the last 24 hours, that was what the last 24 hours had been. Vanessa said the deal was a departmental achievement and that no individual on the team was going to leverage a client relationship as a shield for personal conduct. She said it evenly, without raising her voice, and it landed harder than shouting would have. Then she opened her folder, took out a single sheet, and slid it across the table. It was a voluntary resignation letter, already dated, already formatted with his name, his title, and his employee number in the appropriate fields. The only blank space on the entire page was the signature line. She told him the company was prepared to treat this as a mutual decision, which would protect his record, and that the alternative was a formal performance process that would enter his permanent file and follow him wherever he went next. She said it was a professional courtesy, and that she was extending it because she respected his contributions. Adrian looked at the date on the letter and understood that the page had existed before the meeting and probably before the morning, and possibly before he had ever walked in late at all. He told her there was a personnel clause in Annex 4 of the Whitfield Agreement negotiated in the final round, and that she needed to read it before either of them signed anything. He said it in the same flat register he used for everything else, which was the problem, because it did not sound like a warning. Vanessa said she had reviewed the Whitfield documentation thoroughly and was not going to have a policy conversation redirected into a contract briefing. She said the implementation phase was administrative and the department would manage it. Then she asked him to make a decision. He asked Doyle without turning his head whether he thought this was reasonable. Doyle shifted in his chair. He said everyone had to be held to the same standard, and that if a specialist could roll in whenever he wanted, it undermined the whole floor. He said the word discipline. It was not exactly a lie. It was a man choosing which side of the table to sit on, choosing quickly. And Adrian heard the choice clearly. Vanessa said she would give him a few minutes and left the room, and she left the door open, which was not an accident because within 90 seconds, the substance of it had crossed the floor the way these things do. When Adrian came out for water, 2 people at the printer stopped talking. Someone by the kitchen said loud enough to Carrie that it was about time somebody addressed it. Another voice agreed that the department could not run on special cases. Adrian stood in the corridor with a paper cup in his hand and did the only arithmetic that actually mattered to him. 4 years, 11 phone calls to Cleveland, a compliance package couriered at 7 in the morning, 7 months building a relationship with a man in another hemisphere who had walked away from 3 suppliers in 2 years. 6 hours on a call the previous night that ended at 10 minutes to 5, during which he had argued against his own legal department because it was the honest thing to do. And in the 4 minutes since that door had opened, not one person on the floor had asked a single question. Not what happened, not why he was late, not whether the file on the table was worth anything. 30 people who had watched him work for 4 years had reached their verdict in under 4 minutes, and the verdict was that he was a problem being handled. That was the thing that finally moved. Not anger. Adrian had never had much talent for anger. Something quieter and more permanent. He had spent 4 years believing that if you did the work properly, the record would eventually speak for you. Standing in that corridor, he understood that there was no record. There was only the story people told, and he had never told one, and someone else had been telling his for 2.5 years. He walked back into the conference room. Vanessa returned with her tablet under her arm and asked whether he had reached a decision. Adrian picked up her pen. He did not argue, did not request the human resources representative he was entitled to, did not raise the annex a second time. He signed his name on the line, straightened the page, and slid it back across the table. Then he said the only thing from that room that Vanessa would remember for the rest of her career. He told her she had never once asked what he was working on, and that one day she was going to wish she had. She took it as a threat, filed it as bitterness, and noted the time. He went back to his desk and took a copier paper box from beside the cabinet. Packing took 11 minutes because there was almost nothing to pack. 3 legal pads, a spare phone charger, a department mug he had never actually used. He left the laptop, the badge, and the Whitfield folder squared at the center of the desk because the folder belonged to the company, and he was not the kind of man who took things. Nobody stood up. Somebody near the elevator bank said, "Take care," in a voice pitched for the room rather than for him. Vanessa waited until the doors closed. Then she stepped into the open center of the floor, put both hands on the back of an empty chair, and told them all that after a long and difficult process, the department was finally moving forward, and that she was buying drinks at Marlowe's at 7 to celebrate clearing the last obstacle in the way of where this team was going. The applause started with Doyle. It spread the way applause does out of relief and social reflex, and the ordinary human wish to be standing with the winner. Someone laughed. Someone else asked whether the tab was open. The elevator indicator ticked down toward the lobby, and nobody on the 9th floor watched it go. 16 floors above them, Evelyn Harper had been reading the same document since 9 o'clock that morning. She had run Sterling Hayes as chairwoman for 6 years, and what she trusted was paper. Not because she was suspicious of her managers, but because she had learned early that summaries are written by people with an interest in how they read. It was a principle she applied rigorously to contracts, and as she would later admit in front of 30 people, not nearly rigorously enough to her own organization. The Whitfield agreement had arrived executed at 9, carrying signatures from Whitfield's board, dated 6 that morning. $12 million over 3 years. Evelyn had cleared her calendar and started at page 1, and she was still going 2 hours later when she reached the 4th annex. Section 14, subsection C. The agreement's execution was contingent upon Adrian Carter's continuous direct engagement as program lead, and in the event of his departure from Sterling Hayes Group for any reason, Whitfield reserved unilateral termination without penalty. The name appeared 11 times across 4 pages. There was no substitution mechanism and no cure period. Evelyn read it twice, then called the 9th floor to arrange an introduction, because in 6 years, she had never once been in a room with the man. The largest contract in company history had just been built around. A departmental assistant told her that Mr. Carter had resigned that morning and had already cleared his desk. She did not ask a second question. She took the stairs down to the elevator bank on 12 because it was faster than waiting, and she rode down with the annex still in her hand. The doors opened on 9 in the middle of a conversation about whether Marlowe's took reservations for parties over 20. The room did not understand her at first. Vanessa came out of her glass office with her tablet already smiling, already assembling a greeting, because a visit from the chairwoman on a day like this could only mean one thing. Evelyn said the Whitfield board had executed the agreement at 6 o'clock that morning. $12 million over 3 years, the largest single contract Sterling Hayes had ever signed. She said it flatly, the way people deliver news they have not had time to feel yet. For about 2 seconds, the floor reacted the way a floor reacts to good news. Someone actually clapped once before realizing nobody else had. Then Evelyn held up the annex and said the agreement carried a personnel continuity clause. She read section 14, subsection C, aloud all of it, and she did not soften the sentence about unilateral termination. She said Whitfield's confidence in the arrangement rested on one named individual, that the individual was named 11 times, and that the name was Adrian Carter. She lowered the pages and asked for the second time where he was. The silence had a specific quality to it. It was not shock, exactly. It was 30 people simultaneously reviewing the last hour of their own behavior. Vanessa recovered first because she had to. She said Adrian had resigned voluntarily that morning, that it had been his own decision, and that the department had accepted it with regret. She said the word regret and heard how thin it sounded in her own mouth. Evelyn asked what time. Vanessa said around 10:30. Evelyn looked at the annex and said that Whitfield's board had signed at 6, which meant that for 4.5 hours, Sterling Hayes had been party to an agreement conditioned on a man it was in the process of removing, and that the condition had been broken by the company itself, in this building, by somebody standing on this floor. Doyle was staring at the carpet. Near the kitchen, the person who had said it was about time somebody addressed it, had gone entirely still. Evelyn asked who had handled the resignation. Vanessa said she had as department head and that there had been an attendance issue. Then Evelyn asked the question that would define everything that followed. She asked whether anyone in that meeting had known at the time that Adrian Carter had been on a negotiation call with Whitfield's executive committee until nearly 5 o'clock that morning. Vanessa said no. It was the first outright lie, and she told it, standing next to Gregory Doyle, who had sat at the end of that conference table and written down the phrase repeated availability issues, while Adrian said the words $12 million out loud. Evelyn told Vanessa to have Adrian on the phone before the end of the day, and went back to the elevator, and the doors closed on a floor where nobody was talking about Marlowe's anymore. The first call went to voicemail at 12:15. So did the second. By 4 o'clock, Vanessa had called 9 times, sent 4 messages, and emailed twice from her personal address after his company account bounced her. Adrian was sitting in his car in a grocery store parking lot when the calls started. He watched her name appear on the screen and did not touch the phone. He was not being dramatic about it. He simply had nothing to say to her, and he had spent 4 years being the person who always picked up. At 4:20, Evelyn stopped delegating and called Marshall Reed herself, and she told him the truth, because there was no version of the next 24 hours in which lying to Marshall Reed improved anything. She said Adrian Carter had been separated from the company that morning, that she had not been informed that it appeared he had been pressured into signing a prepared resignation letter, and that she intended to correct it. Reed listened without interrupting. Then he explained why the clause existed. He said Whitfield had walked away from 3 suppliers in 2 years, and that the reason had been identical every time. The person who built the relationship was gone within a year of signature, replaced by someone who had never made a single one of the promises being enforced. He said his board had authorized $12 million on one condition, and the condition was not a company. It was a person. He gave her until end of business the following day. If Adrian Carter was not confirmed in place by then, Whitfield would exercise the termination right, and he added that his board would be extremely reluctant to reopen discussions with a firm that had done this at any price in any future year. Evelyn asked him for one thing, which was that she be allowed to explain it to Adrian herself before Whitfield made any contact with him. Reed agreed, and something in the way he agreed suggested he had already considered making that contact. By 5 o'clock, the crisis had climbed the building. Legal was in Evelyn's office with the resignation letter reporting that the document had been generated from a departmental template at 8:41 that morning, 59 minutes before Adrian badged in at 9:40. Finance was modeling exposure and putting it well past $12 million because 2 supplier commitments had already been made against the contract's first-year volume. Human Resources reported that Adrian had not requested a representative, that none had been offered, and that no prior written warning of any kind existed anywhere in his file. His last 3 performance reviews sat in the top decile of the department. All 3 carried Vanessa Brooks's signature. Vanessa sat in her glass office watching executive floor traffic move through the internal messaging system, and understood by degrees that what she had constructed was not going to hold. She had built her entire position on being the person who delivered Whitfield. She had spent the morning removing the only person Whitfield had agreed to work with. There was no arrangement of words that let those 2 facts sit comfortably together, and she had until end of business tomorrow to find one anyway. At 7, she went to Marlowe's alone, because 11 people had quietly canceled, and she could not face the 9th floor. She sat at the bar for 40 minutes and did not order a second drink. Evelyn found Adrian the next morning by driving to his house at 20 to 8 because he had answered nothing, and she had run out of intermediaries. She stood on his front step in a coat she had not buttoned and told him she was not there as his former employer, but as the person who had failed to notice what was happening inside her own building. He let her in. They sat at the kitchen table where the laptop had been 27 hours earlier, and the coffee she was offered was the first thing anyone from Sterling Hayes had given him in a very long time. Evelyn told him about the annex and about Reed's deadline and about exposure running past $12 million. Then she offered him the directorship of the program, a substantial increase in compensation, and a written apology in any form he wanted it. Adrian listened to all of it without interrupting the same way he had listened to Reed on the indemnity schedule. Then he told her she had the situation backward. He said the reason he had signed the letter was not that he was being fired. He had signed it because he stood in that corridor for 4 minutes, and 30 people who had watched him work for 4 years did not ask him one question. Not what happened. Not why he was late. Not what was in the folder on the table. He said the money had never been the thing. What he had wanted for 4 years was for the work to be visible while it was happening. It never had been. The $12 million had not changed that. It had only made it expensive. Evelyn said the company would restructure whatever he asked it to restructure. Adrian said companies restructure when a contract is at risk, and then they go back to how they were, and that he had watched the shape of it enough times to recognize it. He said he was grateful she had come, and that he meant it, and then he said no. She asked him to think about it. He told her he had thought about very little else since 11:45 the previous morning, and that thinking was not the problem. Evelyn left at 8:20 without an answer. At 11 that morning, Marshall Reed called Sterling Hayes and asked for the chairwoman directly. Whitfield's board had convened early and authorized a formal notice of termination under Section 14 subsection C to be transmitted at close of business, unless the continuity condition was satisfied. The letter was drafted. He read her the opening paragraph, so there would be no ambiguity about what was coming. Then he told her one more thing, and he said it without any pleasure. If Sterling Hayes could not keep Adrian Carter Whitfield intended to approach him directly. Reed said the man had spent 7 months building something on the strength of his own name, and Whitfield would rather employ that than litigate over it. Evelyn hung up and sat with it. The exposure was no longer $12 million and a damaged reputation. It was the live possibility that the person this company had thrown out on Tuesday would be running the same program from the other side of the table by the end of the quarter. Downstairs, Vanessa was summoned to the executive floor at 20 to 12, and she came up with a folder of her own and a version of events she had rehearsed twice in the elevator. She said Adrian had been managing an attendance pattern for months, that the resignation had been mutual, and that she had acted to protect departmental standards. Evelyn let her finish. Then she turned her monitor around and showed her one line of document metadata. Created 841, badge record 940. She asked Vanessa a single question, which was whether she had known about the Whitfield call when she put the letter on the table. Vanessa did not answer it, and the silence answered it for her. Evelyn suspended her on the spot, effective immediately pending a formal internal review, and told her to surrender her building credentials before leaving the floor. Vanessa said something about wanting to state her position in writing. Evelyn told her she would have that opportunity, and that everything she had already said was in the record. Vanessa wrote down alone and did for the first time the arithmetic she had been avoiding for 2.5 years. She had wanted a title. To get it, she had removed the one person the largest agreement in company history depended on. The removal was going to cost the firm more than $12 million and possibly the client permanently, and every document that proved she had done it sat inside a system she did not control, and had never been able to edit. Her ambition had not simply ended a man's career, it had closed its hand around the throat of the entire company. The review opened at 1 o'clock that afternoon. Evelyn ran it herself with the general counsel and the head of human resources, because the deadline was end of business, and there was no time to convene a committee. She gave them one instruction, which was that they were not looking for a conclusion. They were looking for the sequence. The correspondence log came first. It ran to 1,140 items across 7 months, and the shape of it was visible within 10 minutes. The introduction at the March conference, the follow-up call, 53 separate exchanges with Marshall Reed between April and July, every one originating from Adrian's account, most of them sent outside standard hours because of the time difference. Not a single message in the entire thread carried Vanessa Brooks in the sender field. Then the calendar. 4 sessions with Whitfield's executive committee across September and October, all created by Adrian, all sent to the department distribution list, all declined by Vanessa without being opened. The last of them, titled Whitfield Final Terms Overnight Session, had been declined on a Friday afternoon while she was sitting in the same system reviewing correspondence logs. The recorded portion of the September monthly review was harder to sit through. Human Resources pulled the file and played 4 minutes of it. On the recording, Vanessa described the Whitfield negotiation to the executive committee using the phrase "our team has developed," and then the phrase "under my direct oversight," and a board member asked who the point of contact was, and Vanessa said the department maintained the relationship. She had never said Adrian's name in an executive meeting, not once in 7 months. The general counsel checked the 3 quarterly reviews going back and confirmed it. That was the point at which the pattern stopped resembling carelessness. Legal pulled the Cleveland account file, the Western Region compliance filing, and the renegotiated Phoenix terms, and in each one the same architecture appeared. His work in the substrate, her summary on top. His name in the correspondence, hers in the presentation. 2.5 years of it consistent enough to constitute a method. The resignation letter closed the question. Created at 8:41 on the morning of October 15th from a departmental template populated with Adrian's employee number and title. Adrian had badged in at 9:40. The letter had existed for 59 minutes before the man it named walked through the door, which meant the lateness had not produced the decision. It had been an occasion looked for and found. The general counsel put it plainly. There was no attendance pattern. There was no written warning. There was no representative offered. There was a top decile performer with 3 signed reviews and a prepared document waiting for him. Human Resources then interviewed the 12 employees who had spoken in the corridor that morning. Gregory Doyle went first because he had been inside the room. He arrived with a prepared explanation about standards and got roughly 30 seconds into it before Evelyn asked him a single question, which was whether Adrian had said the words $12 million out loud at that table. Doyle looked at the table in front of him and said yes. Evelyn asked what he had written down. Doyle said he had written repeated availability issues because that was the phrase Vanessa had used, and he had assumed she held information he did not. Evelyn asked whether he had verified any part of it, and he said he had not. She asked whether Adrian had asked him directly in that room whether it seemed reasonable, and Doyle said yes, and that he had answered that everyone had to be held to the same standard. None of the 12 had checked anything. 4 admitted they had joined the corridor conversation without knowing what the meeting had even been about. 2 said they had assumed the department head must have grounds. One woman said she had thought about asking and had decided it was not her business, and then said without being asked that she had thought about it every hour since. Vanessa came in at 3:30 with an attorney and tried one last time to hold a position. She said her intent had been to protect the department. She said she had believed the Whitfield terms were complete and implementation was administrative. She said that if she had known about Annex 4, she would never have proceeded. Evelyn told her that Adrian had raised the annex out loud in that conference room before signing anything, and that she had refused to hear it. She said the annex itself had been transmitted to Vanessa on the Thursday, and the red receipt showed it had never been opened. She said the failure was not a missed clause. The failure was 2.5 years of presenting another person's work as her own, and then removing him the moment his visibility became a threat, with a document prepared before he arrived at work. Then she asked whether Vanessa understood that the exposure was no longer only financial, because Reed had confirmed that Whitfield intended to approach Adrian directly. Vanessa had no answer for that either. At 4:10, Evelyn drove to Adrian's house for the second time that day. She did not bring an offer a term sheet or the general counsel. She brought a printed copy of the review findings, 91 pages, and she set it on the kitchen table and told him it was his, regardless of what he decided, because it was the record he had said did not exist. Adrian turned through it slowly. The correspondence log, the declined invitations, the transcript of the September review in which his name never appeared, the metadata line reading 841. Evelyn told him she was not going to ask him to come back because she had asked twice, and he had answered clearly both times. She had come to tell him what the company would do whether he returned or not. Vanessa Brooks would be terminated for abuse of authority and the sustained misappropriation of subordinate work. The employees who had manufactured statements in that corridor would face documented consequences, because a floor that convicted a colleague in 4 minutes was not a personnel problem, it was a culture. And the evaluation system that had allowed a department head to file 3 top decile reviews and then produce a resignation letter would be rebuilt so that client-facing work was attributed by record instead of by summary. Adrian asked why she was telling him if she was not asking. Evelyn said because he had told her that companies restructure while a contract is at risk and then go back to how they were, and she wanted the findings in his hands so that if it happened, he would be able to prove it. That was the thing that moved him, and it was not the money and not the title. He told her he had 3 conditions. First, the apology had to be made in front of the entire 9th floor, and not in a letter, because the sentence had been passed in public, and it was not going to be corrected in private. Second, the new framework had to tie every client relationship permanently to the individual who built it, and it had to apply to every department in the company, and not only to his. Third, nobody was to be disciplined for having applauded, because half of them had clapped out of fear, and he had no interest in a company that punished fear. The people who had stated things they had never checked were a separate matter, and he left that to her. Evelyn accepted all 3. Adrian called Marshall Reed himself at 5:45 minutes before the termination notice was scheduled to transmit. He did not make a case for Sterling Hayes. He told Reed what had happened, including the parts that reflected badly on the firm, and then he said that he intended to lead the program personally, and that Reed would be dealing with him rather than with a summary of him. Reed said that was the only thing his board had ever asked for. He withdrew the notice at 5:30. Adrian returned to the 9th floor the following Monday, 6 days after he had left it, and the room he walked into was not the room he had walked out of. Nobody was at the printer. Nobody was in the kitchen. 30 people stood in the open center of the floor because Evelyn had told them to be there at 9, and the desk by the window had been left exactly as it was on her written instruction, cleared but untouched. The Whitfield folder squared at the center where he had placed it after legal returned the copy. Evelyn did not use the conference room. She stood in the same open space where Vanessa had put her hands on the back of a chair 6 days earlier, and said that on the morning of October 15th, this company had pressured a top-performing employee into signing a resignation letter written before he arrived at work, and that she had not known, and that not knowing was her failure and not her defense. She said the review had established that Adrian Carter built the Whitfield relationship personally across 7 months, that the executed agreement named him 11 times, and that the department had claimed his work in 3 consecutive executive reviews without ever once saying his name. Then she turned to him and apologized directly in front of all of them, and she did not qualify it. Adrian said very little. He told the floor he had not come back for the contract and had not come back for the title, and that he had turned both down twice. He said he had come back because the record now existed, and because the record was going to protect the next person the way it had failed to protect him. The consequences moved through the department that week. Vanessa Brooks was removed as head of strategic accounts and terminated for abuse of authority and the creation of a hostile working environment, with the misappropriation findings entered into her permanent employment record. She did not appeal. Her attorney read the 91 pages and advised her there was nothing in them to contest. Gregory Doyle received a formal written sanction and was removed from client-facing accounts for 12 months because he had signed his name to a meeting record containing an allegation he had never once attempted to verify. 3 employees who admitted inventing statements in the corridor received documented warnings. Nobody was sanctioned for applauding. The Whitfield program launched 11 days later. Adrian ran the first working session from the corner conference room, where he had signed the letter, which was not sentiment on his part. It was simply the room with the better display. Marshall Reed flew in for it, and on the first morning, he shook Adrian's hand in front of the assembled Sterling Hayes team and said his board had committed $12 million on the strength of a man who argued against his own lawyers at 4 in the morning, and that he wanted everyone in the room to understand precisely what this company had come within 1 hour of throwing away. Adrian was appointed Director of Strategic Programs before the end of the month, with the Whitfield Agreement reporting to him directly. He took the title this time, and the reason he gave Evelyn was not ambition. He said the person who had been able to erase him had held a title, and that the only reliable protection against that was to hold one. The new framework went live across the company in January. Every client relationship now carried an origination record naming the individual who opened it, and that record could not be edited by a department head. Executive reviews required the underlying correspondence rather than the summary. Any resignation document generated by a manager was flagged automatically to Human Resources with its creation timestamp attached, a small technical change that existed because of one metadata line, reading 8:41 in the morning. Vanessa left the building on a Thursday with a single box, and the floor she had celebrated on watched her go the same way it had watched Adrian go. She understood the symmetry perfectly because she had designed the original scene herself. She had been 6 weeks from a directorship she would probably have won. She had held 3 signed reviews confirming that the strongest performer in the company reported to her, which is the most valuable position a manager can occupy, and she had experienced it as a threat rather than an asset. What she lost was not one promotion. It was every promotion after it at every firm that would ever call Sterling Hayes for a reference, and the reason was written into a permanent record in language that could not be summarized away. The desk by the window sat empty for a while after Adrian moved upstairs. It went eventually to the junior analyst who had asked about it on the first afternoon, and who, on being handed it, said nothing at all about the view. In any workplace, talent can be hidden by envy for a time, but it cannot be denied forever. A good leader is not the one who removes the people who are better than they are. A good leader is the one who knows how to value them. And when ambition rises above ethics and fairness, the price is not only one career, it can be the future of everyone standing in the room.